Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for our webinar on student loan forgiveness. And I am so happy to introduce our facilitator for today, Miss Lauren with GreenPath Financial Wellness. Lauren, take it away.
Right. Thank you so much, Alta. And thank you everyone for being here today. I'll say good morning. I think it's still morning in Texas. I'm actually up here in Michigan, so technically afternoon for me. But really excited that you decided to join us today for this webinar on student loan forgiveness updates, what you need to know and do. I know that this has been a big swirling question for a while now, and everybody's anxious to find out more, so we'll get right into that. But just to tell you a little bit more about myself, I work with an organization called GreenPath Financial Wellness, and we partner with Neighborhood Credit Union. So our goal is to help provide financial wellness to neighborhood credit union members. So I'm really happy to be able to provide some clarity and direction with all of the changes that have been happening. I do want to give you a fair warning. I'm going to cover a lot of information today. So as Alta mentioned, she is going to be sending out a recording of today's webinar for you to review. That's something that you can share with family and friends if they need some help too. She'll also include a summary of these slides, and that'll have some links that you might need to go ahead and get some information in. And you're always also welcome to reach out to GreenPath as a guide too if you need any further information. So GreenPath Financial Wellness is a 61-year-old nonprofit organization, and our mission is to empower people to lead financially healthy lives. So webinars like this are one way that we do that, as well as free one-on-one financial counseling about topics including student loans. And we'll also talk about some of GreenPath's other services towards the end of our presentation today. So I have a lot to cover, so without any more delay, we'll dive right into the webinar topic and talk about what is going on with student loans. So here's a quick overview of what we'll be discussing today. First, we'll level set with the current status of the federal student loans and the plan for one-time forgiveness. And then we'll take a look at the public student loan forgiveness program. You might see it referenced as PSLF. And we'll talk about the Fresh Start initiative for people who have had their student loans in default. Then we'll talk about ways to identify and avoid any student loan scams. And then finally, we're going to wrap up our time together by outlining some clear next steps to move forward with these programs and to prepare for the payments to resume. Before we go any further, I do have a bit of a disclaimer. First, the information that we're covering today is relevant for federal student loans that are owned by the Department of Education only. So this information typically would not apply to private student loans or commercially held federal loans. Secondly, I'll be providing a lot of general information that may be true in most cases, but there may still be some unique circumstances where the information that I provide may not be relevant. So I would strongly encourage you to communicate directly with your student loan servicer for certainty about your particular situation. And I hope that the information I provide will help equip you to have some of those conversations. And then finally, the most important is that this is still a developing situation. The information can and is changing regularly. So because we're recording, I want to note that the information I'm sharing today is up to date as of January 24th, 2023. But please be aware that there may be additional clarifications and updates over time. So the best way to figure out what is happening right now is to check on the studentaid.gov website for the most up-to-date and reliable information as all of these details get sorted out. So I want to start by looking at just exactly what is going on with student loans right now. There has been a lot of information released over the last 6 months or so regarding a student loan forgiveness plan that was announced in August. So we're going to dive into where things stand right now. So the first thing to know is the one-time federal student loan relief or forgiveness that was announced in August of last year is currently on hold. So in the fall of 2022, the Department of Education did open up an application, and at least 26 million borrowers applied, and 15 million of those borrowers received approval for forgiveness. However, before those loan balances could be updated, there were several court challenges that arose, and that placed a temporary ban on the forgiveness process. So those challenges are still in the process of litigation, and in the meantime, the Department of Education has paused the application process. Now, the goal is to resume the application process once those court challenges are resolved, hopefully in a way that's going to be positive for borrowers. So in the hopes that the lawsuits are resolved in a favorable manner, I'd like to share with you the planned forgiveness and the eligibility requirements so that you can be prepared to apply once again once the applications are opened. So the original plan for forgiveness includes $10,000 of federal student loan debt cancellation for eligible borrowers. President Biden also announced that individuals or those who file taxes as married filing separately and earning less than $125,000 a year, or married couples who file taxes jointly and they're earning less than $250,000 a year as a household in either tax year 2020 or 2021, would be eligible to have up to $10,000 of their federal student loan debt canceled. Additionally, they might be eligible to have up to $20,000 canceled if the individual received at least one Pell Grant of any amount during their time in school. So if you're unsure whether or not you received a Pell Grant, stay tuned. We'll talk a little bit more later about how to find out if you received one. Now, you may notice that I said up to on both the $10,000 and $20,000 in debt cancellations. Basically, what this means is that if you only have $3,000 of remaining debt, $3,000 is the maximum amount that would be canceled. So that means up to means that the government won't be writing you a check for the difference if you don't owe the full amount that you're eligible to have canceled. Now, additionally, anyone who made voluntary payments during the payment pause that brought their student loan balance below the amount of debt cancellation would be eligible and can apply for debt cancellation and receive an automatic refund of those payments made. So to give you an example, the Department of Ed provided the following. If you're a borrower eligible for up to $10,000 in relief and you had a balance of $10,500 prior to March 13th of 2020, you made $1,000 in payments since then, bringing your balance to $9,500, and you fill out the application for debt cancellation, your $9,500 balance will be discharged and you'll receive a $500 refund. So if you made voluntary payments since March 2020, but they did not bring your balance below the amount of debt cancellation, you are still eligible to request a refund. But it's important to note that the refund will increase your loan balance and that the higher balance will be used to calculate your monthly payments when they resume. Now, once the litigation is resolved, we expect that the Department of Education will post the application again. So I would suggest that you sign up for updates from the Department of Ed at ed.gov//subscriptions to be notified when the application is live. So I would encourage you to complete the application as soon as this is announced. And it really just requires a few basic pieces of information. You may have also heard that some borrowers may automatically receive debt relief. I'm still strongly encouraging anyone who believes that they're eligible to fill out that application as soon as it's available to ensure that you'll receive the relief that you're eligible for. So it's expected that the relief would be reflected in loan balances within about 4 to 6 weeks of applying. So that's why we encourage you to apply right away so that ideally you can see this reflected prior to the payments resuming. Now, in the initial announcement, the Department of Ed said that applications would be available until December of 2023. There hasn't been an update to that, but I would expect that there might be an extension of that deadline. Regardless of having an extended amount of time to submit the application, I would still strongly encourage you to get it done as soon as possible. And let me throw that in the chat, the ed.gov//subscriptions for everyone here so that you can sign up for that. All right. So the loans that would be eligible for debt cancellations have to be issued before July 1st of 2022 to be eligible to receive debt cancellation. There were a lot of people that when this first announced went out and took out student loans in hopes that they would get some free money, and that did not work out for them. They had to be issued prior to July of 2022. So eligible loan types can include direct loans, Parent Plus loans, and eligible defaulted loans that are held by the Department of Education. So all loans that were eligible for the student loan payment pause are also expected to be eligible for relief. So borrowers are eligible for debt relief regardless of whether they're in repayment in school or in the grace period, as long as you meet the eligibility requirements. So if you are enrolled in school as a dependent student for financial aid purposes between July of 2021 and June 30th of 2022, your eligibility is going to be based on your parents' income. So something to keep in mind if we've got any college students here. Now, another thing that a lot of people had questions on with the loan forgiveness was if this would be something that they would be taxed on for the debt cancellation. So the American Rescue Plan, which was signed into law in March of 2021, included a provision for this very thing, and it declared that student loan forgiveness would be federally tax-free through the end of 2025. But please know, however, that this only applies to federal taxes. So there could be some states whose tax laws could allow them to tax the debt cancellation on a state or even local level. So some states are already discussing making changes due to this announcement. So I would encourage you to check with a local tax advisor for a better understanding of how the debt cancellation could impact your taxes on a state or local level. So with the payment pause, because of the pending litigation on federal student loan forgiveness, the payment pause was extended further to give borrowers the opportunity for relief before the payments resume. So the Department of Education has announced that this payment pause will end once the lawsuits are resolved or by June 30th of 2023, whichever comes first, and that payments will then be due 60 days following the end of the payment pause. So that means that the latest that we can expect payments to resume will be in late August of 2023. So when student loan payments resume, it will have been more than 3 years since the original payment pause was put into place in March of 2020. I know for me personally, a lot has changed, and for many people, a lot has changed in those last 3 years. So we'll talk a little bit towards the end of our time together about key next steps that are imperative to take to make sure that you're prepared when those payments come due again. Right, so we're going to switch gears here and take a look at a more targeted program that some borrowers may be eligible for, and that is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Now, to be really crystal clear, this is not a new program, but there have been some recent changes to make it easier for people to qualify than it has been in the past, so it's important to talk through this option as well. So this program is one that forgives the remaining balance on federal student loans after you make 120 payments towards your loans while you're working full-time for a qualifying employer. Now, it's important to note that this does not have to be 10 consecutive years. So you could work for a qualifying employer for 6 years, maybe then you leave for a year, and then you start working at an qualifying employer again, and still be eligible 4 years later once you've made 120 payments while employed with the qualifying employer. It was also announced that the months a payment was not due during the COVID-19 payment pause will count towards these 120 months required under the PSLF. So that means that those who worked for a qualifying employer during this payment pause did get a few years closer to loan forgiveness through this program, even though they had no payments due. So qualifying employers for this program include federal, state, tribal, or local governments, military branches, public elementary and secondary schools, as well as public colleges or universities, or a qualifying 501c3 nonprofit organization. So if you're unsure if your employer qualifies, be sure to check in with your Human Resources Department, or you can use the PSLF help tool on the Student Aid website. All right. So prior to the announcement of the student loan forgiveness in April of 2022, the Department of Education also announced an initiative for federal student loan borrowers that were in default called the Fresh Start Program. So before we talk about this initiative, we'll first talk about what it means for student loans to be defaulted so you can determine whether or not this initiative applies to you. So for most federal student loans, your loan will go from being delinquent to default if you haven't made a payment in more than 270 days. So that's essentially equal to about 9 months, although it can happen quicker for some types of loan. Now, I do want to clarify that this would have happened before the payment pause started in March of 2020, as no one has been required to make payments during this pause. So this doesn't apply to you if your payments were up to date before the payment pause started. When a student loan goes into a default status, you switch over from having a past due amount that has been accumulating with each missed payment to the entire loan balance being due immediately. So if you're unable to repay the entire amount at this time, further action to collect on the balance may eventually be taken. And that can include wage garnishment as well as withholding of tax refunds and other federal benefits to collect these funds. So if life happened and your student loans did go into default prior to the payment pause, the good news is that it's possible to get out of the default status without winning the lottery and coming up with enough money to pay off your entire balance. So typically this can be done either through rehabilitation or consolidating loans to get them out of default. But now with the current Fresh Start initiative, we're going to talk about how that will help you get out of default as well. So first, I want to reiterate that as we mentioned before, defaulted student loans are eligible for the $10,000 or $20,000 debt cancellation. If you have a remaining balance after you apply for and receive the debt cancellation, the Fresh Start initiative is something that I would encourage you to take advantage of. So through the Fresh Start initiative, collection relief that you've gotten during the COVID-19 payment pause will continue, and the Fresh Start period, which is expected to last for 1 year following the end of the payment pause. So currently, we expect the Fresh Start period to be ending towards the middle of 2024. So you'll continue to get the following collection relief. Tax refunds and child tax credits will not be withheld. Wages will not be garnished. Social Security payments, including disability benefits, will not be withheld, and collection calls will not be made. If you've been hoping to go back to school, you may now be eligible to access federal student aid again during this period to help make that dream a reality. And you also may temporarily become eligible for certain types of government-backed loans, such as mortgages, while loans are not being reported as in default. So again, the Fresh Start period will continue for 1 year after the payment pause ends. So again, that would be expected to be until roughly mid-year of 2024. During this time, you'll be presented with the opportunity to take steps to remain out of default after the Fresh Start period ends. Now, the details have not been announced about exactly what those steps will be to get out of default permanently, but it's expected that you'll be contacted by your servicer during this period to let you know what steps you need to take. The key, most important thing that you can do now is to make sure that your current loan servicer has your most up-to-date contact information and pay close attention to your email for updates and next steps. And be sure to take quick action to ensure you're able to take care of this opportunity once you get that notification. So what I really want to stress here is that if you have student loans in default, it almost will certainly always cause complications for you. So taking advantage of this opportunity to resolve the default is something I would strongly recommend you do. Even if you don't think that you can afford to make payments, I would encourage you to pursue this option, as you may be eligible for very low or even $0 monthly payments based on your income through an income-driven repayment plan. So we're going to talk a little bit now about how to identify and avoid scams. Hopefully you haven't run into any of these, but we did find that really as soon as anything was announced, scammers hit the streets to try to take advantage of people. So I want to spend the next few minutes talking about how to avoid these scams. However, if you are concerned that you may have already fallen victim, you can report a scam to your state's attorney general or to the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission would be at reportfraud.ftc.gov. So we'll look for some signs of scam. First of all, if you're being asked for money, that's a big red flag. You don't have to pay anyone anything to receive any form of legitimate student loan forgiveness. So if you are being asked to pay an upfront cost or fees, this is a sign of a scam. So it's true that there may be some legitimate companies who can help you take steps that you need to take to apply for a fee, but they are not doing anything for you that you cannot do on your own for free. So if you're considering working with a student loan debt relief company, be extremely cautious and do plenty of research and due diligence before providing them any information or paying any fees. Now, don't be rushed into a decision by a scammer promising to get your loans forgiven quickly. Number one, all loan forgiveness is on hold right now. Even once it's back active, the process will take some time. So if you're being contacted by someone claiming that they can help this happen really fast for you, this is a major red flag. So even if it feels like the process with your student loan servicer is moving slowly, the best thing you can do is stay in communication with your servicer, provide them with the information that they request, and touch base if you haven't received an update in a while to make sure that things are still progressing. Your federal student aid login information should never be shared with anyone. A legitimate representative of the Department of Education or your loan servicer will never need to ask you for this login information. So keep this information confidential as it is used to electronically sign legally binding documents. And we've all heard before that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So that bears repeating as well. If someone contacts you and is promising something that sounds out of line with the information that we covered today, and it sounds too good to be true, trust your gut and avoid being pressured into providing any information or making a quick decision, and reach out to get trusted guidance on whether or not that this is a legitimate offer. And finally, if someone reaches out to you from anywhere other than your student loan servicer, this is a red flag. And if you're not sure who your student loan servicer is, and as a heads up, it may have changed during the payment pause, I would encourage you to look for this information so that you can be on guard against scammers. Even if someone claims to be from your servicer, but you want to be certain, I would recommend letting that individual know that you want to check that you are legitimately talking with your servicer. Go ahead and hang up the phone, ask for a callback phone number, and call back from a phone number that is provided by the servicer on your student aid account. And if the person that you're speaking with tries to talk you out of this by reassuring you that they're legitimately with the servicer, I take that as a warning sign too. You know, your servicer should be glad that you're trying to avoid a scam and keep your information safe, and they shouldn't be upset about you hanging up the phone and calling back to be certain. All right, so we have covered a lot of information in our time so far, but I do want to leave you with some clear next steps to take following the webinar, both immediately and over the next few months leading up to the student loan payments resuming later on this year. So the first thing that I would encourage you to do is to get all of the details on your student loans. So find out who your servicer is now, how much you owe, what types of loans you have, and if you received a Pell Grant. And you can do that all by creating or logging into your account at studentaid.gov. Again, we never want to share this login information anyone. Be sure that you keep it completely confidential. So studentaid.gov is a trusted resource to turn to for details about your student loans. Once you know who your loan servicer is, and please be aware that your servicer may have changed during the payment pause, you can go to their official website and either log in or create an account if you don't have one. Make sure that all of your information, especially your contact information, is up to date so that your servicer can get a hold of you when there are steps to take. So a lot has changed for us all over the past 3.5 years. So even if you know who your servicer is and you know for sure it hasn't changed, be sure to log in and double check that your contact information is still current. If you were on automatic payments prior to the COVID payment pause, I would not assume that those automatic payments will resume without action on your behalf. You might need to update a payment type or make some other changes. So pay close attention to the servicer correspondence as we near the middle of the year to avoid inadvertently going delinquent when the payments resume being due. Now, we talked about scams, but one of the best ways to get reliable information is straight from the source. So you can register to receive email updates directly from the Department of Education at ed.gov/subscriptions, including notifications on when the debt relief application will be available. And speaking of that, when the debt relief application is released, remember to fill it out as soon as possible. Eligible borrowers are encouraged to submit their application once it's posted to hopefully see that debt relief reflected in their loan balances before the payment pause ends. That way you can enjoy some lower payments with your lower balance. And finally, this most important step, this is one that Alta and I have been talking a lot about. It's been more than 3 years without student loan payments due. And a lot of us really don't have that money in our budget anymore. So we need to figure out how can we get back used to making those payments. I would recommend utilizing the loan simulator at studentaid.gov to give you an estimate of what your payments may be and start working on how you're going to fit that payment back into your budget now. If you do have eligible debt for cancellation and you'll still have a remaining balance after the cancellation is applied, those payments will be recalculated based on that new balance. So a couple of ways that we can think about how to fit this back into the budget. Maybe we're in a position where we do have that room. So maybe as a practice or dry run, we can start automatically transferring our estimated payment amount back into a savings account so that you get used to that feel of having that payment come out every month. If you're worried that your budget's gotten a little tight, I know that that has happened for a lot of us. Look at your budget itself. What could you potentially cut? For me, big ticket items are always things like subscriptions. A lot of those are wants versus needs. So take a look at any automatic recurring payments you have, streaming services, things like that. The food budget is also another place that we can often look to cut, maybe reviewing what we're doing for dining out or carry out. A lot of us got used to that during the pandemic, and see if we can make room there. And if we feel like we've tightened up a lot in terms of our, outflow of money, we can look at the inflow of money too. Maybe there are options to do some side work, a gig or side hustle, maybe something on the weekend. So start to think about that before you come down to that month before and you're getting ready, so that way you don't feel that pinch when those loans come due. So your servicer should be in touch with you leading up to the payments resuming later on this year. If you looked at your budget and you feel that you do need to look at some different payment options, you could talk about an income-driven payment plan. There may be steps that you need to complete prior to the payments resuming to apply for that. If you do have student loans in default, your servicer should also be reaching out under the Fresh Start initiative to talk to you about what you need to do there. So it's very important to pay close attention to any correspondence that you receive from your student loan servicer and take immediate action on the steps that they ask you to complete. And then finally, if you are concerned about fitting those payments in, as we discussed, talk to your student loan servicer about payment plan options that you may be eligible for. With some of those income-driven repayment options, that could potentially reduce your payment quite low, even down to $0 if you meet certain income requirements. Another part of President Biden's announcement involved potential changes to these income-based repayment plans. So while these proposed changes are not yet official, that could lead to some borrowers seeing lower monthly payments through those plans if they're enacted. So communicate with your loan servicer about how to apply for those income-based repayment plans. So I know that that was a lot of information pretty quickly, and a lot of it was pretty general. So if you are really concerned about your budget and fitting your student loan payments back into it, or if you would like to have a conversation with someone who can provide you trusted guidance about your student loan situation, you're welcome and encouraged to call GreenPath Certified Financial Wellness experts for a free financial assessment. Typically, we'll take a look at your budget with you and we can collaborate to develop an action plan to prepare to fit these payments back in. We could also talk about any other financial concerns you're having or goals that you have related to things like housing or debt. Alta and I were talking about it. Maybe one of the ways we're going to make room in the budget is with the debt. Maybe there's some credit cards or loans that you're dealing with. So we could talk about debt repayment options that might help you free up some room for these student loan payments. So please feel free to reach out and give us a call. It's confidential and it's free for you as members of Neighborhood Credit Union. So if you would like to speak with a financial wellness expert, you can give us a call at the number on the screen, 877-337-3399. And you can learn more at greenpath.com/neighborhoodcu. There is also on that website a very exciting new platform for some digital financial education called the Learning Lab Plus. So there are some great courses in there about aligning priorities in your budget, looking at debt repayment options. So if you prefer to explore things on your own, that's another way for you to get some further information and education, and it's free for you to use. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to have some time for questions. If you'd like to go ahead and put the questions into the chat, I'll go through and see if there's any that have come up that I can answer.
And thank you so much, Lauren, for this informative webinar. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now so we can get to our very fun Q&A time.